Hi, everybody, and welcome to this three-legged webinar around private 5G. And I just want to. It's very interesting. In January this year, so very recent, research company Analysis Mason have just published a forecast around private LTE 5G. And we're seeing a very interesting transition. Um, the number of private LTE and 5G networks worldwide in 2022 is estimated to be around 4,000. And over the next 4 years, in fact, all the way to 2028, that is expected to go to 60,000 private cellular networks. And enterprise spending is going to increase significantly. It's going to increase from something around 1 billion in 2022 to around 9 billion in 2028. So that's a very significant growth. And what I think is what we're seeing here, we're seeing the transition. We're seeing a transition of private mobile networks from a phase of piloting, testing, proof of concept into the phase of maturity, into the phase of becoming critical operational assets. And if we look at where the investment is being done, in fact, it's interesting. We don't see a lot of change. There is a consistency. So, the big adapters of private cellular and private 5G is the manufacturing sector, followed by mining and transport and logistics. This is going to continue throughout the years. So what we really want to touch upon in this webinar are some of the considerations, the key considerations that we believe need to be taken into account in that transition into private 5G as a critical resource. So it is done in a way that optimizes its success and efficiency. So let me introduce myself. My name is Ronen Spierer. I am the telco solution marketing director for Fortinet, and I am joined by two experts with tons of knowledge around private 5G and private LTE networks and use cases being done today in the marketplace. Dr. Claudius Noack from Lufthansa Industry Solutions, and Liron Ben-Harin, who is the VP of System Engineering at OneLayer. Welcome, gentlemen. And first, what I would want to do is to start really with you, Claudius, because Lufthansa has been one of the early adapters and leaders of actually using private 5G. And I remember, I believe it was Lufthansa Technik, who've actually were very kind in actually presenting and telling what they've done and the results of that they've done, testing both non-standalone and standalone 5G, and some of its applicable use cases. So can you briefly share with us some of the highlights in Lufthansa's journey from testing and piloting the technology to actually using it in a production environment?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. You nailed it with the word using, because what I've seen so far with a lot of other companies, they want to build a network, a 5G network, to have a 5G network. But this is not what we intended to do when we started this whole journey in 2019. In 2019, yes, we have a process called technology scouting. And in that process, we as Lufthansa check new technologies out. Could be blockchain, cloudification, or at that time 5G, because it was all over the news and 5G is the whole new thing. So we checked out how could it really benefit us. And at that time, we found out that the one new thing that 5G brings to you as an industry is that it gives you wide connectivity. You shouldn't look at it from the side, let's say from a telco side. It's not a mobile network in itself where you take normal calls. It's an IT infrastructure network. And that's the first thing that made click for me. Okay, I should look at it from the Wi-Fi and fiber and LAN side here. So from the IT infrastructure side. So who has connectivity issues? And that was the case in 2019. We shouted into our company who has connectivity issues. And then we checked out what of those issues are really an issue that could be solved with 5G. And what are other issues that maybe there's just an access point offline, Wi-Fi access point offline, or could be solved other way around? And this is still the way how we deal with it. Checking the use case out, checking what kind of technology is it. At that time, you named it, and we tried out different technologies because it was new for us. Should we go with standalone, non-standalone? Should we go with an MNO or not? And yes, MNOs are sometimes very beneficial, depending on the use case, again, depending on the country you are in. Germany is very fortunate. We started with an industrial frequency, so we have a band that we can use just for our company. Some other countries joined afterwards. So we tried that out. That was right before Corona, before COVID hit in 2020. We went online with our 2 different networks. And one of the network had a use case that is a remote thing, remote table inspection, it's called virtual remote table inspection, where we join in our clients and customers and their experts. We wanted to have that to be just more efficient, can do that in a shorter time, to have them on our site without them having to be flown into our space here in Hamburg, for example. And then COVID happened. And at that point, it switched directly from a pilot project to a business use case project because our clients were not allowed to travel anymore. All the travels banned that happened. So at that point, we had a system in place with our 5G network and actually the tool, this remote table inspection. This is the real tool. 5G is only the enabler technology. And we needed that tool to fulfill that specific use case. And that really helped us. And this was 2019, 2020. We are now at 2024. Our table inspection is still on 5G because it worked so well and it helps us. Now it's more in a hybrid way. Some people still come to Hamburg. Sometimes half of the engineers come to Hamburg. But now we are in a hybrid way for that specific use case, only talking about that use case. And what happened afterwards is we grew our network, that specific network that we usually talk about. We added another cell here and another cell here. That's actually my main benefit that I see. You can easily grow that network because it's so modular.
Right. So that's I think it's amazing, this coincidence that actually made you move from piloting and testing and this is what I want to do to actually doing it, because, for example, COVID forced you to do it, and it actually provided huge business benefit that help you throughout that environment. And so, you know, I think it's a great example, and I think it's sometimes it's a way that you describe that is different than some of other enterprises, the way that they look at actually how do I deploy private 5G? Do I deploy private cellular? And the thing is, private cellular is complex. It's not cheap. It requires investment both in the equipment, the solution, but also training, understanding the technology, understanding the impact, and then the entire ecosystem that is around it, the devices, the applications, everything around it. And all of that, you know, while the actual success and the return on investment is not always guaranteed, right? A lot of, as you mentioned, I think a lot of companies saying, I want private 5G because it's cool, because it's there, because everybody's having it. I want it. So, you know, Lirona, maybe you can start with it, and I'm sure we can add some more. Is, you know, what are some, from what you've seen, what are some of the key considerations enterprises need to look at when embarking on that private cellular network journey, and what are the benefits, if they're doing it correctly, that they can expect?
A great question, and I'll also be very happy to hear Claudius take right after. I think that, you know, one of the things you need to consider is that there is some sort of an upfront investment when it comes to private 5G. The beauty is, like Claudius mentioned earlier, that you can scale up quite quickly once you have the entire system set up. But you do need to take into consideration things like the band that you referenced earlier, that is not always free, depending on where you are. There is a device ecosystem that's constantly growing, but it's still not at the perfect place where it should be. So year by year, we're getting to see more devices that are supporting LTE modems, 5G modems, but there's still a lot of adjustments that sometimes we need to make, and this can also get costly. But I think from the operational perspective, how you reach better efficiency when you set that up the benefit really outweighs these upfront investment that I mentioned earlier, because the emphasis should be on how you can achieve goals that prior to that were very challenging to achieve, such as much better coverage in your sites, connectivity that's more reliable, the ability to test out some industrial applications that require things like lower latency or higher bandwidth that were mentioned here. And I think on top of all that is also the ability to really benefit from the full control that you get, because it is not only that you enjoy this coverage, reliability, bandwidth, latency, but you're also the one in charge of the network. So you're not dependent on a mobile network operator to benefit from all of the advantages of the protocol. You get to manage the network on your own. So to me, that's a key benefit of private LTE and 5G.
But if I may join in, some companies could say, oh, I have to control all of this. Oh, this is very complicated. And Roland said it, then you need to train people to do that. There are several ways. We have some clients, because our company is not just consulting the Lufthansa group, but also external clients. Some of the clients say, we cannot handle this. And then we explain them how to handle that. And there are different versions of 5G. There are those big suppliers of hardware. And yes, maybe some of them have complex systems, but they can give you very simple stuff where you can, in the end, you are only the one who, okay, this is a new SIM card or a new eSIM. I want to add that to my system. So there are very easy systems on the market. If you don't want to be a telco provider for your company, that's also achievable. And then you can always say, like, okay, I won't do that by myself. Let's get another company being my operator. And just look at your Wi-Fi. Every company now has a Wi-Fi. Who is dealing with that Wi-Fi? If it's your own IT department, then we or other companies can easily train them on 5G, because yes, you have a lot of possibilities, but you don't need to use all of those possibilities. So I can easily train smaller IT departments on 5G. So it's yes, on the one hand, very complex, so you can do a lot of things if you want to. But on the other hand, it can be very simple, so that even, and that's mostly the case, the internal IT department can handle that whole stuff. That's how we do it in Lufthansa, and that's how most of the other companies that we are consulting also do it. They want to do it by themselves, and then it's not too complicated.
So I think Claudius, I think it's very important what you mentioned, because there are different, there are so many alternatives, right? We have today even, private 5G as a service, right? So there's all these type of alternatives, which in a way helps, but also in a way adds to the complexity of actually, enterprise saying, what do I do? How do I do it? When do I do it? Should I do it? And what should be the driving factor? And so, use cases. So twofold question. First of all, for you, Claudius, is having a use case or a set of use cases in the beginning crucial to the success of your implementation or anybody's implementation of a private, or the need to implement private 5G? Or is it the other way around? Build your 5G, build your wireless network as a connectivity solution to provide just mobility, the most basic type of use cases, and then move forward. What would you recommend?
That's interesting. So it's both sides, and I have a sad story for that and a good story. But the sad story is I know of one now client of ours who built a 5G network 2 years ago, and we were in contact with them 2 years ago. And we told them the most important part that you have to do is find a use case before you even start finding a hardware supplier or acquiring the frequency or stuff. You have to find your use case. You have to look into that. Then you can look at what kind of network do you want. They had so you need the experts. In the beginning, you need experts who know what they are doing, who have the knowledge on 5G. So that's really what you need to do in the beginning, having in the beginning experts. Later on, it could be done by yourself, but not in the beginning. What they did is they thought they had experts, because they also had an internal consulting company, technology-wise. They built up a network and they had whole coverage, like Leon said, building a whole coverage system. Yes, and then a year and a half later, they found out, oh, now we have a use case, but our network is not nearly equipped for that specific use case. We should have thought that earlier. Then they called us, and now they are a client of us, and we are helping them equipping their network to the use case, but it's so much more complicated. It would have been a lot better just starting with that use case. And that's how we usually do it. So we have now called use case library. If we coming into companies who want to try out 5G or think 5G is the right thing for them to go, but they don't really know what kind of use case should they go through, then we have our library, and we put that library on the table, not all the 70 use cases, because not all of them will fit. And we check each of them. Is that something that's worth for you? Maybe they have some use cases already, and then for each use case that they think they want to fulfill, you need to nail down KPIs to exactly need to know what's your data throughput, latency, SLAs, and stuff like that. For each use case, there's one page that we then have for our customers to really know exactly and where it happens, what should be done, and now coming back to Lero's thing, with what end device should that use case be done? Because that is, at least in the last year, it's getting better and better. But in the last year, that was the crucial moment. We had use case, oh, perfect use case, we can do that, and the network is there, but there was no end device that could, let's say, transmit enough data in an upload way or so, or with a camera that has the best quality for that, with a 5G modem attached. That is why we have internal, one colleague of mine is working full-time only on end devices. We have a list of, I don't know, 70 or 80 end devices that have been tested in private networks, because not all of them work in private networks, not all of them work on every private network. Again, complex system. It might work in that one vendor, let's name one, Nokia, and not working in Ericsson, or other way around. It's really, that is something where you need those experts to know exactly, this is the use case, this is the network supplier, and this is the end device. And OneLayer actually has a very interesting system when it comes to those end devices, because when I think of my system, I have now a lot of new end devices in my system. How can I manage that they are all secure? And OneLayer has a very good approach for that, I must admit.
Yeah, and in fact, it's great. It's really a great lead in into the next topic and you mentioned both of these elements. When you're talking about private cellular networks, and regardless of whether it's 5G or 4G is much more mature in that respect. But we're talking about a whole ecosystem, right? We're talking about putting in a technology which is a piece of an entire ecosystem that includes both the devices themselves, the end devices, but also the different applications, edge computing if required, anything that can use the benefits of a private cellular networks. And we're also putting it in an environment that already exists with their own objectives, constraints, requirements, regulations, and so on and so forth, right? So this all means that cybersecurity has to be taken into account, and throughout this very complex ecosystem, and of course introducing private 5G and private network may have some impacts on what was done previously and how it should be done coming forward. So, Liron, what are some of you would categorize some of the key security risks and the solutions companies should consider when implementing mobile wireless private networks?
Great question. And I think I'll start by saying that I think the good thing is that from an architectural perspective, private cellular is at a good spot, right? Because you have encryption built in, you have mechanisms like SIMs that provide you with an added layer of authentication, you have a lot of edge computing involved, up-to-date protocols. It's a really good place to start. But I think having said that, one thing that we really do need to account for is very much like Claudius mentioned earlier, think of the use cases. In many senses, they're just an extension of your already existing OT and IT use cases that you have in your other networks. I mean, forget about private cellular for a second. The same application that you have running in your network is now running using different infrastructure. And when you think about it from this perspective, the point is that you need to also have the same standard that you have for OT and IT. It's just different infrastructure, but same type of devices, right? So you still need to understand what are the devices that you have running in your network, how do they behave, You need to be able to analyze these patterns and determine, are they malicious? Are they abnormal? Is everything happening according to plan? You need to have the ability to set the right rules and to be able to enforce, to make sure that the network is properly segmented and no device can end up communicating with something that it shouldn't do. So I guess in many ways, the entire point is that the network itself is secured, but you have to be aware of the entire ecosystem. You need to know where are the devices, you need to know how they behave, and you need to be able to manage that constantly, especially as the network scales and grows, and you start having more and more use cases in different locations. Keeping track of that is going to be a great challenge, same way it's always been for OT and IT.
Yeah, I think visibility is key for security, right? You cannot secure what you don't know that exists and you cannot see. I think that's really crucial. Claudius, any addition point of view from your side?
Yeah, there are some of the pros. The two departments, when I'm being asked, who are the departments that you should involve first in those private 5G networks inside your company? It's actually not one department. The first thing is always the worker council. That's always the first that I would go to, because you are now transmitting new stuff and people might be afraid. I don't know. So just approach them at first. But the two departments that you should approach is IT infrastructure, because it's not like a mobile network, it's like an IT infrastructure. And the second is IT security, because if they are not from the start inside this project, they might block you because of this is a new technology. I've never tried this out. These are new devices. How should we integrate that? So security is the one key issue. And as Lyron described it, there is one very fairly easy way, that's a good thing, to separate devices, and that's the DNN, formerly known as APN. So what we are doing, for example, in Lufthansa, we have different APNs. The typical managed devices, such as the laptop that I'm using here, that is normally on Wi-Fi inside our integrated system, is allowed with that specific APN to connect to our internal data network. Yes, because it is allowed via Wi-Fi. Why shouldn't it be allowed via 5G, private 5G? But sometimes we have new devices, trying out new devices, testing out new devices that shouldn't go into our internal database. They get a different APN. It's the same network, different APN or DNN now. If you separate that correctly, then at least you have another layer of security. And that is the good thing. The system that Leon showed me last time that we want to try out in the future is also very interesting, because we will add more and more devices to our 5G network. So far, most companies such as ours haven't installed like thousands of devices, and one of the reasons is the security aspect. So I can name some. Up till now, it's just a threshold of 100 devices that we are using. And coming back to the system, I had one concern for another colleague of mine who I told about that system, and they said, now we are checking the data patterns of individual devices, of individual workers. That is also a kind of working council issue, and we need to address that. If we have that pattern, and Lyron, I bet you have been asked this question a couple of times, so maybe you want to address that we are checking the patterns of devices of individuals. How can we have that in an anonymous way that the worker council will still accept that? Maybe you can approach this.
Sure. So I think this is.
Sorry,
go ahead, please, Leon.
Okay. So, I mean, my take was that in the end of the day, you're right. There's a privacy component to it too, and the way to overcome it, at least our strategy, is to be able to analyze what is the device based on the signaling patterns and not based on looking at the data path itself, right? So if you're examining the data and you're looking at the application there and you're breaking it down, yes, you can learn information about who is the end device, right? And be able to determine Claudius is the one running, using this phone right now. But maybe on the other hand, if you're breaking down the signaling patterns and you understand how the cellular behavior of that device operates, how it's communicating with the network, that's what allows us to learn, hey, that device is a cellular device. It is by that vendor and of that model, and this is how it's behaving. It doesn't necessarily tie it to Claudius. So that's some ways to sort of overcome these privacy issues and use segmentation tools like Fortinet to then only leverage that information to be able to do the right and proper segmentation in the network.
And I also think that this consideration, this concern has been existing in when utilizing new type of technologies such as NDR, an AI-based analysis of data traffic in IT networks to actually identify potential risks, things that have been technology that have been there for a while, and there are ways to ease the privacy concern, and I think that has to be done also when we're talking about private 5G as the network. Now, so I think that from both your answers, we definitely know that cybersecurity is important. Like any type of networking technology that we're putting in, and definitely in a complex ecosystem where sometimes the devices themselves cannot be secure or have very little security capabilities. Another thing that I want to mention is that as we've seen, it's manufacturing and mining and logistics which are adopting private cellular, and these sectors rely on operational technology, right? And operational technology has its own specific set of regulations based on the different sub-industry yourself. So if it's energy, there's going to be a different one. If it's manufacturing, it's going to be a different one. If it's a different utility, there might be a different one. But they're all originating from the same type of model, which in most cases is what is known as a Purdue model, right? And the thing is that the question that I want to pose to you is, does introducing private cellular, private 5G, impacts or affects the Purdue model or other related regulations and compliance issues, and how can that be handled?
Yeah, it does. Same as it did with last technologies. You mentioned that when you have new technologies, you always need to adapt that. I cannot remember the time when we've installed Wi-Fi in Lufthansa, because I was not there at that time. But I bet it was the same discussions. Like, do we really need that? What kind of use cases will we do on that? We do have our good local area network. We have some other wireless transmitting technology. Why would we use Wi-Fi? And it's kind of the same way right now, because that's the mostly asked question for me is, do we really need that 5G? Will it replace Wi-Fi? No, it won't replace, but all companies that have a sustainable size, like let's say 3,000 square meters or bigger, they will just have that as an addition for their ecosystem. So the device will then in the end decide itself what's the best way to go for this specific use case, for this specific application that you are using. So in the past, the application might have been running on Wi-Fi, might have been running good, might have been running badly, and now it has this new technology, and the platform can decide, okay, let's use the 5G on that. So the module will just work better, and that will always be the case. There will be a new technology after 5G, which like AI, as you said, and just ask all the companies, how are they adapting to GPT? Large language model. What are they doing with large language model? This is a huge impact, but it gives you so much benefit, as does 5G with your enabling. And in a future, in a near future, all companies will use large language models, and all bigger companies, sizely bigger, will have 5G as an additional connection.
I completely agree, and I think that what you mentioned is correct, and the beauty of it, I think, is that technology evolution also allows us to make sure that the new technology that affects existing regulations and modules and models, operation models, allows us to take that into consideration and make sure that we comply, that we adapt. And a good example is, for example, the combined solution from OneLayer and Fortinet allows you to implement the boundaries that the Purdue model demands within your private 5G network. So you as you mentioned, you can be flexible. You can say, okay, based on the use cases, based on device, what network do I choose? What technology do I choose? And so on and so forth. So I think this is something that definitely enterprises should be aware of when you introducing new technology. Private 5G, like any other technology, it has an impact on what you're doing today, on your regulations and compliance, but there's always a solution to do that. And I mean, it's so interesting. We can go on, but we are getting near to the end of the webinar, to the time allocation. So really, I want to close up a sort of a summary round. So twofold question, and maybe we'll start with you, Claudius. What are your, I would say, prediction? What do you expect to be the evolution of the private 5G market in the coming years? And what do you see are the key use cases that we're going to see throughout the industry?
That's always the question, right? Where is it going?
Yeah.
The first one, where is it going? An MWC in Barcelona, I had a discussion with another colleague of mine, not Lufthansa, another colleague. And I told them the POC time is over, the piloting time is over, because this is technology that is now on the market for 5 years. Yes, end devices, you have to check those things. With all new technology, at the beginning, you need those experts. But now you can really implement it because there are technology on the market that will solve you. Like, I just want to add one misconception that's always there, and you started with some words of that. You said it's cost intensive, that mobile networks are cost intensive. I don't see that anymore. If I have a field and let's say a new production site with no Wi-Fi yet, you just should do the comparison. How much would it cost me to build Wi-Fi in there? How much would it cost me to build 5G in there? Yes, that is not always the case, but just imagine imagine a life where you don't have to cabling your Wi-Fi access points anymore. That's what we are doing for our colleagues of ours. They need specific Wi-Fi in a specific place. We have 5G there. We just give them a 5G Wi-Fi access point. So that is also something, it's not that expensive anymore. Even the initial costs, like, I know this is not an industrial case, but I can place you a 5G system for 10,000 euros on your table, and it will give you a 5G network. Yes, not for your whole company. But it's from a very low starting point to trying this out to not too much expensive if you really check in your use case and what you're using. And the last question, to answer that quickly, what's the driving force of the use case? I think it's in general digitalization and sustainability. And I have one use case that I see in all of our companies: getting paperless. Getting paperless is more sustainability. It's more sustainable. It helps you with your process because you're more efficient. But what do you need for that? If I ask my colleagues, because we have a lot of paper in aviation, I tell you, a lot of forms and stuff, and they tell me if we want to go paperless everywhere, we need a good connection everywhere. And it's just that the tablet that's now has the platform on is connected wherever I go, because it's just too complicated to go back to your Wi-Fi access point or wherever you have data available. And it's such an easy use case, but getting paperless, having the connection wherever you go, is one of the most adapted use cases that I see, but it's not very sexy. Yes, it's environmental friendly. Yes, it saves you a lot of time, but it's no drone flying around. It's no AI case that's very fancy or stuff, but it saves you money. That's good. It's good for the environment. And I think that's the way to go in the next couple of years.
Great. Thank you, Claudius. Liron?
Sure. I'll quickly say, I think like with every emerging technology, we live in a world where nobody wants to be first, but everybody wants to be second, you know, and luckily I think we already have companies like Lufthansa that were the brave ones to try out the technology first and to really push the boundaries and lead to the ability of other companies to already have sustained use cases, some practical applications they can test out. And to me, that's the biggest thing, right? That's what's going to hasten adoption. When we're going to have more and more use cases, we're not going to have to rely on purely converters to make sure that legacy traffic can use private LTE, but rather have a device ecosystem, have various capabilities and tons of different vendors providing solutions in that market. This is where we'll start seeing the exponential growth. And we're already there. I'm just saying, like, to me, that's the vector that we're seeing right now. You mentioned MWC. Every year that I go to MWC, I see private LTE, private 5G all over the place, right? These are the two big words that are always there for every single booth you go to. And I think it will stay this way. There's a lot of players here. There's a big global interest that this technology will succeed because there's room for it, right? It really solves a practical problem. We really do need better connectivity for mobile purposes. And I think we're almost there. That's my take.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. I just want to add that for me, the killer application that is the basis for everything that is clear, it's mobility. It's the fact that we can provide with private 5G and LTE type of mobility that goes beyond what Wi-Fi, at least today, can provide. And I think that will determine everything going forward. And this is the driving force behind private wireless. And what we're going to see is, I think, the merger of these two technologies. Right now, we're still looking separately at Wi-Fi and at private mobile, but I think that's going to come together both in the way that solutions are provided, the management, the security of all of that, and that will allow again, unlocking new type of use cases and so on and so forth. So I think that is really key. So with that, I really want to thank you so much for your experience, your insights, your information sharing. I hope that for our audience, I hope you found this interesting, enriching, and in behalf of our panelists, I want to wish you all a great day and great success with your private cellular endeavors. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Have a good one.